Welcome everybody to our second chapter on our study of corridos. We are going to devote today's program to the poetry of corridos. Last time I owed you a performance of this song, and this corrido will help us understand a little bit how corridos are put together, because I'm going to be referencing this song later on. So I'll perform this. I've been performing corridos since I was a little kid, and this is one of the earliest ones that I learned to play. When I arrived in the U.S. in 1982, we moved to southern Indiana, and there weren't very many Spanish speakers down there, and so as you can understand, corridos being so important in the lyrical content, it was very difficult to perform corridos for my audiences in southern Indiana. So I came up with something inspired by a Mexican actor, Ignacio Lopez Tarso. He, during the 1970s, took a lot of corridos and decided to recite them instead of singing them. So I borrowed that idea from him, and I translated the lyrics to English, and I intersected them throughout the song as sort of subtitles for the song. So this is my rendition of Rosita Alvírez. The song tells a story about a girl that was shot at a dance for refusing to dance with a man. It goes like this. Año de 1900, muy presente tengo yo. En un barrio de Saltillo, Rosita Alvírez murió. Rosita Alvírez murió. The year was 1900, and it's still very present in my mind. In a neighborhood of Saltillo, Rosita Alvírez died. Su mamá se lo decía, mi hija esta noche no sale. Mamá, no tengo la culpa, que a mí me gusten los bailes, que a mí me gusten los bailes. Her mother told her so. Rosita, you listen to what I say. Those dances are not for you. It's much better for you to stay. No, but Rosita did not listen. Her mind was out of touch. She said, Mama, it is not my fault that I like to dance so much. So she went to the dance, and they danced to some polka music. Hipólito arrived to the dance to get the prettiest girl in town. When he walked up to Rosita, Rosita just turned him down. Rosita, no me des aires, la gente lo va a notar. Pues que digan lo que quieran, contigo no he de bailar, contigo no he de bailar. Rosita, don't turn me down. What will people think of me? Well, let them say what they will. You are not dancing with me. Uh-oh. Hipólito put a hand on his waist and pulled out a big gun, and poor little Rosita was shot 3 times and was gone. Oh. El día que la mataron, Rosita estaba de suerte. De 3 tiros que le dieron, no más uno era de muerte, no más uno era de muerte. That Sunday afternoon was Rosita's lucky day. For out of the 3 shots, only one put her away. Her mother told her so. I told you so, Rosita. I knew it all along. It was because of all that flirting that your day had to come. Su mamá se lo decía, ya viste, hija querida. Por andar de pispireta, te había de llegar el día, te había de llegar el día. Rosita le dice a Irene, no te olvides de mi nombre. Cuando vayas a las fiestas, no desprecies a los hombres, no desprecies a los hombres. Rosita said to Irene, in Mexico, the dead can speak from the grave. And she said, don't you forget my name. And when you go to those dances, think of me and don't do the same. Rosita's now up in heaven, settling accounts with the Lord. Hipólito is in jail, feeling the full weight of the law. In his declaration, he said, Your Honor, let me go for goodness sake. You see, she shot herself with my gun when she felt my embrace. Liar. Rosita ya está en el cielo, dándole cuenta al Creador. Hipólito está en la cárcel, dando su declaración, dando su declaración. La declaración que dio, Señor, yo no la maté. Solita se dio el disparo al tiempo que la abracé, al tiempo que la abracé. Rosita's house was red. I'll say this as my farewell note. With Rosita's blood, they gave her house a second coat. La casa de la Rosita estaba recién pintada. ¿De qué color, compadre? Oh, pues yo creo que era colorada. Con la sangre de Rosita le dieron otra pasada, le dieron otra pasada. All right.
Juan,
Okay.
can you share the key that you were playing this song at?
The key, A major. A major.
Thank
We have
you.
some guitar players in the audience, but let's begin. Like I mentioned before, I moved to Southern Indiana. I was getting ready to go to college, and one of my professors in college offered a course on corridos, and he introduced me to view corridos as literature. And this was very revealing to me. I never considered corridos a high art form, but he introduced me to the work of this gentleman, Professor Tristram Coffin, a folklorist. He used a technique called emotional core theory to analyze different versions of the Scottish ballad Mary Hamilton. And what he did is he used tools that were developed to study literature and poetry and apply them to Scottish balladry. Professor Americo Paredes from the University of Texas took the same approach but focused it on a Mexican art form of corridos. And he applied this emotional core theory to the study of corridos. This was a pioneering work in the study of corridos, and he himself was the professor of Professor John McDowell, who was my professor at Indiana University. John McDowell took it a step further, and he applied performance studies theory to the understanding of corridos and published more work. Now there's a lot of academic work on corridos, including the work of this woman, Maria Herrera Sobek. She studied the characters of women in corridos and used another theoretical approach called the archetype theory to do a feminist analysis of corridos, analyzing pretty much how are women portrayed in corridos. This was interesting to me not only in the terms of how women are portrayed, but how anyone is portrayed and how the archetype of a Mexican person or a Mexican person that should be considered heroic or admired is portrayed through the history of corridos. Last week we had an opportunity to look at the history of corridos from its earliest forms. So let's analyze corridos. Now, today we're going to look at the poetic rules of corridos. Next week we are going to be writing our own corrido in English. And so I want to introduce you to some of the rules for how to put a corrido together. And that will be what we spend most of today's class doing. Okay, so let's begin. The poetic rules of corridos. The first thing we're going to look at is the rhyme scheme. Here's a sample verse. Someone spoke to Don Valente. Let's call this letter A. Two men whispered in his ear. So in rhyme scheme, we're trying to see which line rhymes with which line. So ear doesn't rhyme with Valente. We're going to call that a B, right? Valente put on his gun. That doesn't rhyme with Valente or ear, so we're gonna call that a C. Took his horse and all his gear. So ear and gear rhyme together, so we're gonna call the B again. So our rhyme scheme with ear and gear rhyming together and Valente and gun do not rhyme, so we're gonna call that an ABCB rhyme. This is the ideal rhyme scheme for corridos. Second line rhyming with the fourth line. Some corridos have a few more lines and we can look at that, but let's see. In the fields of horses walking, by a very narrow street, comes my friend Antonio Zeta, full of sorrow and defeat. All right, can somebody give us a rhyme scheme here?
Is it the same A, B, C, B?
Yes, A, B, C, B. So street rhymes with defeat. Walking doesn't rhyme with zeta, so we're going to call this ABCB. So that's perfect. Very well. Thank you very much. Here's the next one. It was the year of 2011 to be exact. Two brothers drowned in a lake. It was a matter of fact. What do we have here? Okay.
ABCB.
ABCB. Thank you. Thank you. I can't see your name, but thank you very much. Exact rhymes with fact, so we have ABCB again. Now listen well to my story, for you may later regret, not knowing what you could get, for stealing there is no glory. What is the rhyme scheme here? Okay, I see in the chat, ABBA. Very good, exactly. Story rhymes with glory, regret rhymes with get. That makes it an ABBA. Now, this is a very nice rhyme, but it does not work for corridos. It may work for son jarocho, but not corridos, okay? Now let's try another one. And now I must bid farewell as a dove flies to the skies. Michael Hansen was unwise, of his fate no one can tell. What do we got? Again, ABBA, very good. ABBA. Great. Okay, you're catching on. So let's move on. We got rhyme scheme. I think we got it down. Okay, let's look at poetic meter. So poetic meter refers to the number of syllables on each line, right? So here we have our verse again. Someone spoke to Don Valente. Two men whispered in his ear. Valente put on his gun, took his horse and all his gear. How many syllables do we have on the first line?
8 syllables.
8 syllables. Yes, someone spoke to Don Valente. Let's spread them out here. Someone spoke to Don Valente. There we go. Someone spoke to Don Valente. 8. Okay, next one. Yes, 7. Two men whispered in his ear. 7. Yeah. Valente put on his gun. 7. Valente put on his gun. Yes. Took his horse and all his gear. Took his horse and all his gear. 7. Okay? So, we call this meter 8-syllable verse or octosyllabic, even if it has 7 syllables. Notice the accent should always fall on 7. Even if you have an 8-syllable verse, your accent should be on 7. Otherwise, it will not work with our melody. If we're playing this on a rhythm, in the fields all horses walking, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In the fields of horses walking, by a very narrow street, comes my friend Antonio Zeta, full of sorrow and defeat. So unless we have that accent on 7, it's not going to play well, because the accents will be on the offbeat, and it might not work for us. So let's keep in mind, you don't have to be, if you get good at this, you won't have to be counting every time, but it will become second nature, as you learn the melodies. Okay, so in the fields of horses walking, by a very narrow street, comes my friend Antonio Zeta, full of sorrow and defeat. Very good. Okay, so we have the meter and we have the rhyme scheme. Now let's look at the narrative form, the plot line. Corridos have a plot line, or narrative corridos do. I know some of the recent corridos are not necessarily narrative songs. They don't tell a story from beginning to end, but they actually just express admiration for someone, or they brag about something about themselves, etc. So those belong to a slightly different style. But let's look at the narrative form for the tragic narrative corrido. Let's look back at our corrido with Rosita Alvírez, for instance, which happens to have all 8 of these components. Our first one is the headline, a permission or introduction. In the headline, because corridos are almost journalistic, they will begin telling you the entire story in a nutshell. It was the year of 1900 in the town of Saltillo. Rosita Alvírez died. So they grab your attention. This is, imagine a newspaper and you're reading the big type on the headline telling you, stick around, read the rest of the story. Some of the corrido singers will ask permission. They'll say, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to sing a corrido. Please listen, because this song is not just about, lyrics that you can ignore. You need to pay attention to this. So they identify the song as a corrido, and typically people start paying attention. So that is our introduction. Next comes our introduction of the characters. As any good story, you're going to introduce people to your characters. In the Rosita Alvírez corrido, we spoke about Rosita, the kind of person that she was. She liked dancing. Her mother is introduced as someone who is very domineering perhaps, or very, she wants to be, she doesn't want her daughter to go out. She feels that it could be dangerous, etc. So we are introduced to the characters. Many corridos have a warning that something bad may be happening soon. In this case, the mother tells the daughter that how dangerous these dances could be, and that you never know what could happen. So this is where the warning comes to our hero. Then comes an element of defiance. Our hero is going to show the heroic qualities by being defiant, telling the mother, don't worry about me, nothing's going to happen, I am defiant. And this begins to define, in a sort of Mexican archetype, what makes a courageous individual. A valiente is someone who has no fear and who is willing to defy even the law or anything that comes in their way. It's a defiant nature of our corrido hero. So Rosita shows her heroic qualities by being defiant against her mother. Later, she shows defiance against the man that approaches her about dancing. So there is usually a section where there is a confrontation between the two people or the two forces that are going to come against each other. And during this section, there often is an exchange of words. There are quotes where it says, Rosita said, well, in this case, Hipólito says, Rosita, you are so beautiful. I want you are going to dance with me tonight. And she responds, no, I am not. I don't feel like dancing with you. Go away, right? So she shows defiance again, but there is a dialogue with quotes. And this adds to the credibility of the corrido. Corridos are supposed to be real life stories, and by quoting people or looking, mentioning dates, or in this case, in the next stanza, they mention how many bullets that were shot, when they killed Rosita. So that's what follows, the tragic outcome. And usually there's a detailed account of what happened. In the famous Corrido de los Pérez, for instance, they talk about how, like, in what direction the bodies fell when there was a shootout between cousins over a horse race, and there was rumors that they had been cheating, and they're some sort of family feud that ended up at a shootout. And one body fell to the north, one body fell to the south, one to the east, and one to the west. And when they were all down, it looked like a cross on the ground. So that's sort of the tragic outcome. Our next one is the moral. Here comes the mother again, and shows up seeing her daughter fallen, and she tells her, I told you so. You should have listened to me. And Rosita even goes further and tells her friend Irene that she's sorry about what she did and not repeat what she has done if she ever finds herself in the same situation. So there's that moral of the story. We're beginning to wrap this parallel thing of the escalation of the drama with the warning and the defiance, and now we are sort of in retrospect looking at the tragic outcome. By the way, all of these narrative corridos are typically spoken in the third person. So the corrido singer is talking about someone else, and they're honoring a third person, this hero that's not the corrido singer himself or herself, but they're speaking in the third person, except for the first line where the corrido singer says, I'm going to sing a corrido for you, please listen to me. So the first line could be in the first person. Now the last element, which is the farewell, the corrido singer comes back, again with this sort of symmetry. The corrido singer comes back and thanks the audience for having listened to the corrido. Thank you for listening to this corrido. You may now go on to do whatever you were doing before. And this is where sometimes they make a reference to a dove flying away. Vuela, vuela, palomita, fly, oh little dove, and carry this message to everyone so that they may all know what happened, carry the news. That is this narrative form. This is sort of the perfectly shaped corrido. So you all familiar with the story of the Titanic? And I was visiting a middle school in Middleton, Wisconsin, and I asked the children, after giving them this lecture, if they would be interested in writing a corrido and what they would like to write about. So at the time, the movie, the Titanic with Leonardo DiCaprio had just been out, and the kids had watched it and they were all into it. So they knew all the details, and they said, let's write about the Titanic. And I said, perfect. You can take any tragedy and write a corrido about it. So let's see. So we started. They all did a little research. They went in what year it happened in and the names of all the characters, etc. So here it goes. In the year of 1912, many people were in panic. As they crashed into an iceberg, they were aboard the Titanic. Okay? So the job here was to, in a nutshell, to tell them the entire story, right? So there it is. The Titanic crashed into an iceberg in 1912, and people were in panic. All right? Syllables, 7 or 8. In the year of 1912, 7, many people were in panic, 8. As they crashed into an iceberg, 8, they were aboard the Titanic, 8. There it is. So the next one, we introduce the characters. Captain Smith and his big crew and musicians on the boat, they were very confident they would always stay afloat. Okay, second line rhymes with the fourth line, and there it is. Captain Smith was actually the actual last name of the captain of the Titanic. Next comes the warning. As the engineer had warned, lifeboats just weren't enough. They were not ready to sail. Their condition was too tough. Enough rhymes with tough, and there it is. The engineer is the one that gives out the warning, and we see him in the movie too, like discussing with the captain. In fact, they're now going to have an encounter in the next section, where in the Defiance, where the captain reacts to this, and he says, "But this was her maiden voyage, and the captain was annoyed. Nothing will stop us from sailing, not even the greatest void." Right? This is the captain being defiant here. So next comes the confrontation. Here comes the quote. So the engineer and the captain have it out. So the engineer says, "Don't say that I didn't warn you," said the engineer with sorrow. "Moonless nights can be deceiving, and we might not see tomorrow." So yeah, we know what comes next. So here comes the tragic outcome. There was an iceberg in sight. The Titanic tried to turn, but there was no moon that night, and the sinking was confirmed. So turned and confirmed is kind of a soft rhyme there, but we got those to rhyme. We also got sight and night to rhyme. So this is an A-B rhyme that also works. We did see the research that it was in fact a moonless night, and that was one of the reasons why the Titanic crew did not see the iceberg. So next comes the moral to the story. There's a moral to the story. Prepare for the unexpected. Just when everything seems safe, you may be badly affected. No kidding. Okay, so unexpected with affected, and that was the tragic outcome. Next comes our farewell. So instead of a dove, here we chose a seagull. The kids wanted to do something maritime, so they said, well, let's switch it out to a seagull. So fly away, O little seagull, you may fly into the night. And like when you're struck by lightning, everything comes out to bite. No kidding. Okay, so night and bite is our rhyme here. So there it is. That is our 8-stanza corrido written by middle school students. And I'm sure that we can do the same. We could certainly don't have to pick like a story like this, but we could pick something more contemporary. We could maybe we could do a corrido about Epstein or something else. Okay, so this is our segment on corridos. I have a little bonus material. Let's see. I think we probably have time. This pretty much wraps up all the material I have, but I do have a lecture that I do about a corrido about the failed Pancho Villa punitive expedition. This is a historical event Pancho Villa crossed the U.S.-Mexico border and raided Columbus, New Mexico during the Mexican Revolution. And in the U.S., the President Woodrow Wilson sent a punitive expedition to hunt him down. This expedition was unsuccessful. That caused a lot of joy in Mexico. It made Pancho Villa into a folk hero, Pancho Villa the outlaw. So here's a little thing about the emotional core of corrido. Now, these corridos are not composed, or I guess the composer is not known. They are composed by someone and they begin to be spread around, and different musicians, different singers may add or remove verses from these renditions. So when you see something in the oral tradition, you see variations. When I was studying this corrido, I took 5 versions. They're at the top, A, B, C, D, E, and then the number of stanzas on each of them. So, not all corridos are perfect corridos like the Rosita Alvarez. There's a reason I picked that one as an example. But here I want to show you more of a real case scenario where we see variants. So the first stanza on A, once I identified stanza 1, that same stanza appears in version B. It appears in D and it appears in E. So what the emotional core theory is, trying to see what are the oldest stanzas, the ones that are more persevering, according to this theory. So when you compare many collected versions and you keep only the ones that are repeated very often, you can probably guess which are the oldest and the original ones, if you are seeking that type of originality. So here's a case study of the Persecución de Villa, the failed Pancho Villa punitive expedition. Here's a map of Agua Prieta, and then you can see a little bit just north of, if you can find Columbus there, where the story originates. The general in charge of the Agua Prieta fort, on behalf of the Mexican government, was General Plutarco Elias Calles, this gentleman right here. Later on, he became president of Mexico. So he writes a telegram to the president of Mexico, at the time was Venustiano Carranza, sends a telegram. This is a Mexican president at the time, also a former general during the Mexican Revolution. And he says, I have the honor to share with you that this afternoon I returned to my work to learn that at 4:30 a.m., Pancho Villa with 400 soldiers attacked the U.S. town of Columbus in New Mexico, surprising the Americans. And during the combat, 12 American soldiers died. Villa ransacked the shops, killing their owners and some of their neighbors. And there's great excitement at the border. And the American press is exciting the public opinion. American authorities are mobilizing their troops to retaliate. They are gathering in the towns of Douglas and Columbus, etc. So this is the actual transcript that I was able to find in the library at Indiana University of that telegram, part of the public record in Mexico. Here is one of the stanzas from the corrido. Cuando entramos a la plaza de Columbus, todos los gringos se echaron a correr y gritaba su padre Pancho Villa, mexicanos, avancen al cuartel. When we entered the plaza of Columbus, all the gringos ran away, and their father Pancho Villa yelled, Mexican, charge against the barracks. Okay, so here the Pancho Villa is portrayed as this courageous leader. There's a picture of Pancho Villa. His real name was Doroteo Arango. So there he is. This is the town of New Mexico. That's from the U.S. newspaper, March 9th, 1916, about all torn down and burnt to the ground from this attack. Ruins of Columbus, New Mexico, after being raided by Pancho Villa. There's more pictures. This is General John Pershing. He was in charge of the U.S. Army this punitive expedition. The president at U.S. was Woodrow Wilson. He's the one that wrote a message to Venustiano Carranza asking permission to come into Mexico to come after those bandits. Very good. Okay, so here goes the corrido. This story took place in our beloved Mexico when Venustiano Carranza was president. 1,200 Americans crossed the borders to hunt down and punish Pancho Villa for his slip. This is our opening line. So this is our introduction to the corrido. This is the headline. This is another version from another corrido. Mexico, February 23rd. Carranza allowed Americans to come across 2,000 soldiers, 200 airplanes, hunting down Villa to kill him. I mean, this is, hear ye, hear ye. This is the headline. Patria México, febrero 23, dejó Carranza pasar americanos, 2,000 soldados, 200 aeroplanos, buscando a Villa, queriéndolo matar. Our introduction from two different versions to the corrido. Here comes the warning. Carranza said to them with enthusiasm, if you have the courage it takes to pursue him, I will grant you permission. This may teach you a lesson on how to die, right? So here's another defiant individual, Carranza. Now, the history books don't portray Carranza as having ever given permission to the U.S. Army to cross the border. General Pershing crossed the border despite Carranza's denial. And Carranza, being in the middle of a revolutionary war, was not able to do anything about it. But that is, according to history books, that's what happened. But in corridos, they like to dramatize all this. And Carranza warns them. He's like, okay, come after him, but you'll never get him because he's smarter than you. So here is an account of a U.S. soldier in his memoir. The first 10 days were about the most rugged I've ever known. We slept on the ground, rolled in our blankets. The pup tents weren't much protection. There were cattle all over the country, branded and unbranded. We'll kill a cow and roast the beef in hunks, held over the fire on a stick. We ate it half raw with no salt. I've never been able to enjoy rare steak since. Believe me, we felt like celebrating when our supply train with hard loaves of bread, canned meats, fruit, and milk finally caught up with us. So, yes, the American soldiers were having a hard time hunting down Villa in the desert. According to this memoir, the Mexicans did not live up to the ideal bravery represented in the corridos. There is another account. While we were at Camp Dublan, Colonel Tompkins sent for me and another soldier called Mac. We went to this tent wondering what we'd done wrong. The colonel said, I have a mission for you, man. He wanted an aparejo, a Mexican saddle outfit for mules. There was one, he said, in Carranza's warehouse there, but he didn't want his stolen from the Mexican government. He wanted us to pay a reasonable price for the aparejo, wherever we found it. So Mac and I rode upriver about 7 miles without seeing anything promising. We dismounted and sat on the bank, smoking and resting a bit. We weren't in much of a hurry. As we sat there, we saw a Mexican riding up the river. He rode his big burro and led another. Mac and I looked at each other. The pack burro carried just what we were looking for, an aparejo. So we got up and started toward the Mexican. The poor paisano took one scared look at us walking toward him, gave sort of a hopeless yell, and took off through the cedars on his burro. He dropped the lead rope on the other animal. We tried to call him back and tell him that we only wanted to talk to him, but he just kept going. Anyhow, we examined the aparejo and saw it was just what the colonel had ordered. So this is one of the soldier memoirs of another account of what was happening. So here's a few more stanzas. So the Americans organized several raids and Villa was nowhere to be found. They went back disheartened and tired because they couldn't give Villa his due. Another one. Those poor little soldiers from Texas soon began to tremble. They were so tired after 8 hours on foot. Those poor souls just wanted to go back home, portraying the American soldiers as cowards and the Mexicans as the courageous ones. This is a very nationalistic, very highly patriotic song. Those soldiers were very angry after long marches under the sun. Pancho Villa made fun of them by sending them painful messages. Here's some verses about Pancho Villa's superior technology. So early in his career, as a leader in the revolution, Pancho Villa recognized the value of airplanes and their coming importance in the military. His army was said to be the first to use planes in Mexico. Records show that he bought planes from the United States and hired American barnstorming pilots. U.S. Air Force records show that in May of 1913, Villa flyers bombed federal gunboats at the Bay of Guaymas, being the first aerial bombing in the Western Hemisphere. Records from the Air University of Alabama show that Villa had 4 planes, 2 Wright Bs and 1 Christopher & Curtis Pusher, and a Martin T model. Villa used a small park in Montgomery as a landing field, as well as rough airstrip near the town of Matamoros. So according to, we don't know if he ever used airplanes to fight General Pershing's punitive expedition, but since he was known for this, the Corrido incorporated this into the Corrido to add more valor and glorious hero status to Pancho Villa. So it says, Pancho Villa doesn't ride a horse anymore, and neither do his people. Pancho Villa owns airplanes. He leases them with great ease. So now we see a description of Pancho Villa's triumph. Those on horseback could not ride anymore. Those on foot could not walk anymore. Then Villa flew over his airplane and shouted from above, "Goodbye!" Another heroic feat. Once it was rumored that Villa was dead, and they all cried with pleasure and joy. So the Americans were celebrating that they heard that Villa was dead. Now, dear fellows, we can go home to Texas covered with honor. But they didn't know that Villa was still alive and that they would never find him. If you really want to see him, you'll find him resting at his home. He's in Parral. You can pay him a visit there. So Parral is very far from where they were looking for him, down towards the mid-south part of the state of Chihuahua. Okay, so Pancho Villa was more intelligent than the gringos. Okay, here comes another celebration of the heroic qualities of Pancho Villa. The Americans sent more punitive expeditions, but Pancho Villa disguised himself. He dressed up like an American soldier, and all his people did the same to confuse the American airplanes that were flying overhead. One time, some American planes flew over to survey the ground below, and they saw an American flag that Villa had painted on the ground. So when the pilots landed and they fell into a trap, they landed and Villa took them prisoners. I mean, there is no other account that this was factual, but it was included here to add to the drama. Pancho Villa told them in a message that he had killed 600 of them at Carrizal, and that they should be grateful to Carranza for sparing the lives of the prisoners. They say that Pancho Villa cut his prisoners' ears off. There's always rumors about cruel leaders that do awful things to the prisoners. So, it's part of the war strategies to scare your enemy. So this is increased by the fact that Villa clips off one half of the right ear of prisoners taken in battle as punishment, but pardons those who voluntarily join him. So if you turn coats and join him, he'll pardon you. All the people in Ciudad Juarez were amazed when they saw so many American soldiers that Pancho Villa left hanging from the poles. So he cut off their heads and put them on poles. All the people in Chihuahua and Ciudad Juarez were left amazed and scared at seeing so many gringos and Carranza loyals with their ears cut off by Pancho Villa. This is a farewell formula. It says, this is at the end of the corrido. What were those Americans thinking? Did they think combat was a ballroom dance? Hiding their faces in shame, they returned to their country empty-handed. This is an account of the morale of the American troops upon their return to the U.S. being very low. To the trained observer, most remarkable feature of the homecoming of the troops of the American Expeditionary Force from the northern Mexico was the absence of all sentimental demonstration. When the troops headed by General J.J. Pershing and the staff began to cross the international border at 10 o'clock Monday morning, there was not a cheer, not a face changed expression, as the men and officers, tanned and dust-covered, marched through the gate that separates Mexico from the United States. The village of Columbus, 3 miles from the international boundary, and the numerous spectators from Deming, El Paso, and elsewhere had planned something in the way of a noisy welcome when the troops should pass in review before what had been the headquarters of the base in the line of communications. But the masks of stoic indifference worn by the soldiers repressed enthusiasm. There was just the faintest outburst of applause, but it died quickly away, and only the shuffles of marching and the rumble of heavy wheels could be heard between the selections by the bands. So this is a very somber description of the U.S. return in defeat. So we see this analysis of this corrido shows a corrido as a historical document, shows a corrido as a historical narrative, corrido as a worldview of a Mexican people. So how do the Mexicans see this international conflict? The Mexican worldview as a very heroic nationalistic story with all the attributes of defiance by all the Mexicans involved, Pancho Villa and Venustiano Carranza. What episode does the corrido choose for the narrative? these airplanes, the soldiers returning tired and defeated. This story is very selective to pick the things that contribute to its narrative and its worldview. How are the characters described? What motivates them? The characters, the Mexican characters are described as courageous and fearless, and the Americans ones as weak and tired. To what extent can we consider these characters' events as archetypes of a corrido mythology? Well, so this is sort of the questions I was asking as a student of folklore, revisiting these corridos that I have been singing since childhood as works of literature. I mean, what happens when we put these tools to these corridos? So yes, we see these archetypes of the Mexican valiente and the evil foreigner that comes in and tries to defeat Mexico. If there is such a mythology, how does this corrido mythology provide an insight into a Mexican worldview? I mean, if you cross over into anthropology and you want to use corridos as a view into Mexican culture, can you see these characters crossing over into the general cultural attitudes in Mexico, and to what extent do they hold? So there it is. Now we're going to write our own corrido. So your homework is to think of a topic, an individual that has undergone a tragedy that we can write about and do some research about them. Usually a tragedy that was preventable works best, so that we can have a warning and fill in all these things, okay? So here is our sections, and we have reached the end of our presentation. So I thank you very much. And thank you for, if you have any questions, I'm happy to, there's some applause flying through the screen. Thank you, thank you. So thank you very much. I think I see Ashley over there, Ida, thank you. Screen is too small to see you all, but thank you so much. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.